Welcome to another episode of Getting to Know Your Indiana Neighbor. Now, if you're watching this, you don't need an introduction from Dana Winklepleck, right? Dana, thank you very much.
Oh, it's so good to see you, Greg.
But for those of you watching who don't normally watch my podcast, you might need an introduction of myself. I'm Greg Bateman, and I do these Getting to Know Your Indiana Neighbors with neighbors mostly in the Martin County and surrounding communities, people who have had an impact in our community. And I've retired a couple of years ago, just do these for fun, and this ought to be fun with Dana. In fact, two birds with one stone we're knocking out today because she obviously has had an impact on the Wabash Valley. But she's a local girl. And Dana, you'd be surprised when I put that on Facebook how many people in Loogootee said, I didn't know, had no idea she's from Loogootee. Others said, yeah, I think she was in my brother's class. I think she was in my sister's class. So
and I did read some of those comments.
Oh,
some very nice things people said, so thank you for that.
And they did, and they will as we do this. So we're just going to have some fun. The routine is we kind of go through Dana's life chronologically, from the ground up, where she is today, what's next, whatever. But let's start, Dana, if you don't mind, with growing up. You grew up in Loogootee.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your parents, first of all. Tell me about them.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much.
Well,
I'm so honored that you asked me to be part of this today.
Can I, real quick on Dana, because I did Rick Simler about a year ago, less than that. And so Rick was my connection. Rick is, of course, here at Channel 2 now.
Yes, we're glad to have him.
And we're glad that he's here. But I sent Rick a message and I said, hey, Rick, you know, I think Dana Winklepleck, being a local girl, would have a lot of interest here as far as my podcast is concerned. Is she down to earth? Is it something that she would, you think, do? He said, I quote, she's the best.
Aww.
And here we are. So appreciate that.
I'll slip Rick a 20 for that.
Whatever it takes. But your parents?
But that's very sweet.
Yeah.
Yes. So my parents, my mother grew up in Plainville. She's a Plainville High School graduate.
Right.
Yes. And then my dad, he grew up in Odin. And so my dad has since passed. He passed in 2020, but my mother is still alive. She lives in Bloomington, and I have a younger sister who lives over in Owen County, in the Spencer area.
All right, so one sibling.
One sibling, yes.
Okay. So you grew up in Martin Davies County.
Yes.
Right?
So, yes, started out in Davis County in the Odin area. After kindergarten, though, my parents moved to Loogootee, and my dad opened a bait shop sporting goods store right beside West Boggs Park.
All right.
And so we lived there until my parents divorced, right before I went into the 6th grade. And my dad stayed in the area, but my mom, she worked in Bloomington, so we moved up there, my sister and I and my mother.
So there was, right across from that bait shop that you were talking about, a restaurant called George and Martha's.
So that was my aunt and uncle.
Okay.
Actually, that was right beside the bait shop, yes. And so my aunt and uncle, George and Martha, they had the restaurant, and they lived in a house behind the restaurant. Mm-hmm. And we had the bait shop, and we lived in a house that my dad had built right beside there. And in fact, the reason why we built that house, while we were waiting to build it, we had a mobile home in back. And I don't know if anybody remembers this. This was in the 70s, but there was a tornado that came through, actually flipped that mobile home. So my dad, my sister, and I were all inside. And we always say, my dad always said what saved us was that the couch, because I was in the 1st grade, I think, it tipped over end to end and it held up a beam. And so it kept the floor, because now the trailer was upside down, It kept the floor from coming down on us, and then we were able to slip out a broken window.
Wow. And
so yeah.
And you were how old about the time?
About 1st grade when that happened.
Okay.
And also that year, I got hit by a car right there on US 231. So
that's a tough year, but everything came out fine.
It did, and you know, I have so many wonderful memories of living in Loogootee.
George and Martha's son, Fred Winklepleck, was a classmate of mine.
Okay, yeah, my first cousin Fred and his sister Laura was in my class. All right. So back in 1987.
Well, let's talk about some of those Loogootee peeps that you grew up with, because I think it's very interesting. A couple, 3, 4 time gets away, but Dana attended our Loogootee School's alumni celebration. And you just went through the 5th grade, so you must have stayed in touch, had a great connection with that class, which would have been what?
So it was class in 1987, and I had such fond memories being there, and a lot of them I have kept in touch with, so I'm Facebook friends with them. Some of them I still see once in a while. And what I like is that they have embraced me. I guess once you're part of the class of 87, you always get to be part of the class of 87, and they invite me back to come back to their class reunions. And I think having my cousin, also Laura, who was in that class, that helped me stay connected to them as well. So I just love my Loogootee peeps.
All right, well, let's call some of them out then.
Okay.
Some of the people you ran around with. Who would that have been?
So Michelle Harris, Brenda Sutton, Donna Matthews.
Brenda's a cousin of mine.
Yeah, Brenda's a cousin
You're
of
going
yours.
to find a lot of these that I'm very familiar with.
Now, a lot
Donna
of these,
Matthews.
yes, she's Donna Ader now, but a lot of these I remember from, of course, their maiden names: Dina Swartzentruber, Rebecca Bridgewater. So just a lot of good folks. Diana Rainey.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you said that you go to the same gym as Paul Ader.
Yeah, so Paul Ader is Donna's brother-in-law.
Yeah.
He's a beast at the gym, let me tell you, but I do see him, and right after his brother was elected mayor of Loogootee, I'm like, and I didn't realize they were brothers, I'm like, is that your brother who got elected? And he's like, yep, that's him. So,
And I graduated with
guy.
another brother.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Of his. So Loogootee's a small town. So, you know everybody there. You did back then. We still do today. But I'm glad you've got those connections. I'm glad you have fond memories of our hometown.
You betcha. And we lived right beside West Buggs Park, so just a couple of houses down from the entrance of the gate. And my cousin Laura, who was, again, lived right next door, we would get up in the summers. We would help each other do our chores. We would have our cereal, and then we would walk to the beach every day and go swimming. And I always wanted to know how many miles that is from the back of our house, because we would cut through. We wouldn't go through. We wouldn't go through the gate, but back then you could do that when you were in elementary school. You and a buddy could just walk to the beach. There were lifeguards then, and enjoy the day and then walk home.
Have you been to West Boggs Park in recent years?
Oh yes, I've been there many times over the
Beautiful.
years.
They do a great job.
Yes, and I had an aunt who lived on West Boggs Lake for a long time until she passed. So we'd go to her house and stuff like that.
All right. So you were in Loogootee through 5th grade?
Yeah. School through the 5th grade.
Some of the teachers you might remember.
Oh, I remember one of my favorite teachers, my very favorite teacher of all time was Mrs. Porter. I think it was Anna Porter. Did you know Mrs. Porter?
Oh, I had Mrs. Porter.
Yeah, she
my dad had Mrs. Porter.
Well, by the time I got Mrs. Porter, she was older.
Yes.
But she was my 4th grade teacher, and I loved to read.
Yeah.
Because, reading can take you everywhere. And so she instilled in me the love of reading. And I always wanted to tell her that, but she passed before I ever got the chance. So I remember her, Mrs. Beasley. She was my 4th grade teacher as well from math. And then Sister Cecilia Agnes Ward, who you said you had as well. I had her in the 5th grade. And when you're kids, so Sister Cecilia Agnes Ward was ahead of her time. So if you were sick, she had a can of Lysol. And she would spray it all around your desk if you coughed or you sneezed. Now, being kids, we always kind of joked about that.
Yeah.
But, after COVID, I'm thinking the woman was brilliant.
Let's get it out. Let's get it out. Yeah. Bring your own.
Yes, so she was definitely ahead of her time, but I always enjoyed her classes as well. She was strict.
Yeah. Oh, she was strict.
Yeah.
She was strict. But she was a nun.
Yeah,
right?
well, yeah.
Okay. All right, so 5th grade comes and goes, and you have no idea what's to come from there, right?
Right.
Your parents divorced, you said?
Yes.
So lead me into that, where you go from there.
So my parents divorced. My mother worked in Bloomington at the time, and she'd always just commuted back and forth. But after my parents divorced, my dad stayed in the Loogootee and Odin area. But my mom, she went ahead and moved to Bloomington, so we went to there. So I went to one of the middle schools in Bloomington, and then graduated from Bloomington High School North, and then I went on and I graduated from IU.
Yeah, Bloomington North, a little bit different than Loogootee as far as...
Yes.
No, so you went from small town to what we consider big town. Was there much an adjustment for you?
You know what, it really was. And I always say that if I'd had the choice, I probably would have enjoyed growing up in maybe the small town my whole life. I enjoyed the small town atmosphere. Man, we would go to the basketball games every Friday night, but it was a social event. So you saw all your friends. You saw your friends, you saw your friends' parents. Or once you got to the bigger cities, they really didn't do that. And you could just be involved in so many activities. Now, I was still involved in activities at Bloomington North, but you could be involved in so many more if you stayed small town. So I'm a big proponent of small town. I live in a very small town now. I live in Duggar now with my husband.
Oh, you're in Duggar?
Yes, because that's where he grew up. But yeah,
I'll go by Duggar on the way home, and I'll tell him you said hi.
Oh, you do that.
I'll do that. So you would have left Loogootee.
Yeah.
Little math, around 1982, something like that.
Yeah, maybe 81, 80, somewhere in that area, yeah.
So I want to tell you something. I know you've been on this set for how many years? How many years have you been at
I just
WTWO?
celebrated my 30th anniversary in August.
Well, happy anniversary.
Well, thank you.
But
well, when you start at 5.
Yeah, I know, 37. but I got to tell you, I was on this set long before you even thought
Oh,
about
really?
it. I was.
So tell me about this.
All right. I was in school at Indiana State. I worked at WPFR Radio.
Okay.
And they had a weekend sports anchor job open here. Mark Allen
Mark
interviewed me. And Mark asked me a question that probably took me out of the running because I never got the job. And I remember that question was, you're going to school, you're working full time. Do you think you would have the time to, what makes you think you would have the time to work on the weekends and still do whatever you do? And I remember specifically that I thought about that and I said, I'm not sure I can, but I'd like to try. That was my answer. It wasn't a good answer. And it didn't work out for me. But I was here long before you even thought about it.
Well, that is a great story. And you know what? I think you turned out okay there, Greg.
I hope so. I think things turned out all right.
I think so.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. I always want to say Channel 2. So if I say Channel 2, I apologize, but that's what we knew growing up.
Yes, exactly. On the black and white TV that you had to mess with the antenna.
You too?
Yeah, we still had some black and whites in our house.
Right. So in my family, we were watching a game and somebody said, what channel is it on? And I said, we don't do channels anymore. Yeah. You know, it's all streaming. So what is the channel? So we're going to talk about a lot of changes that Dana had to grow up with and to get to this beautiful place that she is. But that's down the road. So we're at Bloomington North now.
Right, Bloomington North, okay.
What activities did you do at Bloomington North?
Well,
what did you enjoy doing?
I swam for the high school swim team for a little bit. I also was an athletic trainer there. Okay. I was the class president for 3 years. And then my senior year, I actually went overseas and spent that year as an exchange student.
Did you? Where'd you go?
So I went to the Philippines.
Okay.
Because I always wanted a life of adventure. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that would be the great place to start. And I have to credit, my mother. She was like, go for it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So those who watch know that I usually ask the question, when you were a young one, 12, 14 years old, any aspirations? What did you want to do at that point in your life?
Well, I always thought I would be somebody who worked in embassies across the country. Again, I thought that across the world. Again, I thought I wanted this life of adventure. So I remember specifically writing myself a letter that I would open, in 20 years to see if I had fulfilled that.
Really?
And I had wrote there that, I'm sure I had traveled the world and worked at embassies and things like that, where the exchange student thing, that was part of traveling the world. And then in college, I was exchange student for a semester in what was then Slovenia, the country, or Yugoslavia. It's now Slovenia. But I went to the same university as former First Lady Melania Trump.
Really?
Yes. Didn't know her. But we would have been there about the same time, so that's a little factoid.
That is.
But she's from Slovenia as well. So but that was a great experience. But yeah, I always thought I would work for embassies.
Well, you did all right yourself too.
All right, thank you very much.
But have you traveled the world?
I have done a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
So I lived in those 2 different countries. I've been to Japan. I've been to a lot of the Caribbean. We've traveled a lot in the United States. And that's really still one of the things I love the most. I would like to go see the Great Wall of China. I cannot convince my husband maybe that we need to go, but I just think that would be kind of iconic. I backpacked through Europe after living in Slovenia by myself, which, again, my mother was fearless because I'm like a 21-year-old, and she was like, go for it.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
That's fantastic. Did your sister have the same adventurous mindset?
She's just not that person. She has her own life, and she has done very well, but, that's not something that she was interested in.
Isn't that interesting?
She has 5 children.
Oh, well. All right, there you go. Okay. So at Bloomington North, were you a good student? I would assume that you were a pretty good student.
I was a pretty good student.
Yeah, pretty good student. All right, by you saying that, how good? Were you like valedictorian? Or?
No, not that good, because you got to remember Bloomington North.
It's a big school.
There are brilliant people there. Like, when you watch, The Big Bang Theory, that kind of brilliant people, there were those brilliant people there. But I was a pretty good student.
Yeah. Journalism. When did journalism become something in your life that you thought might be a stepping stone maybe to what you wanted to do?
Well, I had actually, and when I said IU, I majored in economics. And then when I got done with that, I'm like, what the heck am I going to do with this degree? It's kind of like having a history degree. So I'm like, I always love to ask questions and be inquisitive. So I'm like, I'm just going to stay a little bit longer and get a major in journalism as well. And once I started doing that, I just fell in love with that.
Well, IU, pretty prominent school of journalism, right?
Yes, of course, Ernie Pyle, School of Journalism back then. Yeah. But I almost did not make it into journalism school because back then you had to take a typing test, and that's how they weeded you out. And I had the hardest time because you had to type so many words a minute. Yeah. I had the hardest time passing that dang test. But c'est la vie, I made it in. And
wow. Typing. Do you guys know what typing is? Do we want to tell them what typing is?
I'm showing my age a little bit, but that's what qualified you. You had to pass so many words per minute. Yeah.
Well, it is journalism. You have to write your own stories.
Yeah, you do.
So you have
I
to do that
type
somehow.
all the time now.
Yeah, keyboard, right?
Yeah, keyboarding now. I'm pretty fast at it.
So, Indiana University, you end up with a degree in journalism?
Degree in journalism,
Okay.
yeah. And so while there, I had an internship here at WTWO. So I first had an internship at Wish TV in Indianapolis, which at the time was the CBS station, and then I got one here. And this is what I always tell people when I go speak to students especially, that just work hard. No matter what job you're given, just work hard, even if it's not the job you want, because somebody will notice.
Yeah.
So as an intern, I tried to learn everything I can. I tried everything I could. I tried to be as helpful as possible. And then this weekend job came open while I was still in college. And basically, my job was to sit in a room all by myself and listen to police scanners. And back then, we didn't have cell phones.
No.
And so all we had was a CB radio. But if I heard a fire, I'd be like, I'd call the crew that was out there, or I'd CB radio them and say, hey, there's a fire at 13th and Chestnut. Can you guys get over there? And so I did that for several months, every Saturday and Sunday. And then eventually I graduated, and a full-time job here at the station came open in August of that year. And so
30 years ago.
30 years ago. And I think it's because, and I say this humbly, but I think it was because I worked really, really hard at that not so glamorous job.
Right.
And then my news director noticed and eventually gave me a full-time job.
So in 30 years, that first job was the police scanner.
Yes.
All right, so then you get the anchor position, right?
Well, I started
you're on-
out as a producer, so
Okay.
I worked behind the scenes for a couple of years.
Producer does what?
So what they do is we decide what stories in what order go into a newscast. And so you put all the stories in the order, and we have to call it time the show, because there's a definite beginning and a definite ending. And so, like, let's say the anchors chat a little long, or the weather person goes a little long. Well, you got to start pulling out stories that can't air because we don't have time for them. And so you just make sure that that show gets in and out on time, and you decide what goes in it.
I remember, I believe it was probably in college, when it seems like, I may be wrong, but the bantering just started there. You know, it was always the news, it was sports, the weather, they were done. But there was some awkward bantering, it seemed like, at times between anchors and sports and news. Now it's common, now it's not awkward, but it seemed like there was a period of time when somebody said, you got to do this.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it was to fill time, possibly, right?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, or to be more personal, maybe to show some personality.
That's probably
or
the case,
I don't, because when I got here, that was already happening,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah, and I can't imagine you have any problem with bantering.
Well, there are some days you're like, what the heck is she saying?
So at times did they say, Dana talked too much, let's go let stories out.
Yeah, maybe so. They're usually like this. This means wrap up. So they're probably, I get that once in a while. Yeah.
Producer, then what?
So then I became a reporter. So sometimes I'd have to shoot my stuff by myself. And back then the equipment was like 40 to 50 pounds, and I'd lug that around. And we had VHS tapes we put in this equipment and went. But we also had photographers that I would get to use sometimes as well. But you know what? That's probably one of the biggest changes, because now the equipment, I mean, you can use your phone and we use our phones sometimes, and when we're out shooting stories, and we have an app that we can send video back through the app here to the station that can be used on air. But just the camera and the tripod, all of it is so light. And we have like a little SD card, they call it. It's like a 1x1 card. And so from that VHS tape, everything now is taped on that.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredible. Everything is edited on a computer, where back in the past you had, you had to go from VHS tape to VHS tape, and you had a lot of stuff in between. It's just gotten easier.
Yeah, that's what I asked Rick Simler. You know, they're everywhere all night long on Friday nights. How do you get the story back?
Yeah.
He said basically it's there and written by the time they get back. They just send it back through whatever technology they use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's gotten a lot easier.
Yeah. First story, do you remember when you had your own job, you were out doing a story? Do you remember your very first story?
I do, yes. So Jim Jenkins was the Vigo County Sheriff, and they were having an auction, a sheriff's auction, and I got sent to interview Jim Jenkins and take a video of all the things that were being auctioned off, and that was my very first story. And Jim then became, whenever I got engaged, he then owned a restaurant, and just ironically, I got engaged in Jim Jenkins' restaurant.
Is that right?
Yeah, so, and he put on the marquee, Dana and Bob, that's my husband, did it here.
Oh, well, now, okay.
Which he thought was pretty funny.
Yeah,
We got some video of it.
Some people would.
Yeah. So I have this tie to Jim Jenkins.
What was the restaurant? I might remember it.
It's the Black Angus. So
Well,
it's still
okay,
here in
yeah,
town.
yeah.
Yes, it's owned by someone else now, but
Okay.
that's where it was at. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So first story, the interview with Jim, were you happy with it?
Jim Jenkins, yes, because it's probably my first story, so
Yeah.
I thought, I'm sure I thought it was great.
Yeah. So I wouldn't have thought that. I probably would have thought that's terrible, but I'm sure you were great.
Oh, when I look back at some of my old stuff, I'm like, why did these people not fire me?
Yeah, I'm sure everybody does though, right?
Yes, we all start out a little rough. So
Through the years, this isn't something I asked you, prepared you with. Sometimes I send them questions, just topics, and then I'll throw them off with certain things, but we flow with the conversation. But the biggest story, the best story, I don't know how you want to describe it, but the most memorable story maybe that you've done, can you think of something off the top of your head?
Well, I tell you what, one of the best things that I have ever done, this year has been phenomenal
Yeah.
for me. I have to say, after 30 years, what I always think is the best is yet to come. And this year has proved it because I've got to follow Richard Goodall, which I
Yeah.
think we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
He, of course, just won America's Got Talent. It has been a phenomenal journey for him, and I was glad that I got to go along with that. And then earlier this year in May, I got to fly in an F-18 with the Blue Angels. That was a phenomenal experience.
Okay, now you weren't really flying it.
No, I was
Yeah.
I was the passenger. I was in the back seat, but
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
We went just very close to the speed of sound, and we were flipping and turning, and it was just an amazing experience. And then before that, I was on Dateline. Because I'd been around, there was a murder case in Vincennes where a gentleman murdered 2 VU college students a few years apart, and so Dateline did a whole story on them. You can still see it on the Peacock Network if you want to watch it. But that was just a phenomenal experience as well to get to be on Dateline. That's like a journalist's
That
dream.
is, but gentleman might be a phrase that probably isn't the right one.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
But again, Dana being Dana, I mean,
And you know what? I also have witnessed 11 federal executions, and the reason why I did that is that the federal government has to have media witnesses, and they needed some local folks. And I just been here a long time, and I could handle that, and so that has been something that I did as well, and as part of my journey.
Wait a minute, you mean you sat there and you were able to watch the actual execution?
Yes. Yes, so under the Trump administration, there was a series, I think a total of 13, and I did the first 11.
Wow.
And then a couple other people decided they would like to be a media witness for it. So I was there for those as well.
I don't even know where to follow up with that.
Yeah, I know that's a hard transition, isn't it? But before that, I was at the McVeigh execution, which was probably one of the biggest stories that I
Timothy
ever
McVeigh.
covered, because the only federal execution chamber is right here in Terre Haute. And so I was on the outside, though, for McVeigh. I was not a witness for that one. But that was another thing I covered that was very big.
Wow. All right. Yeah, let's talk Richard Goodall.
Okay,
for a
Richard
little
Goodall.
Did you know Richard Goodall prior to this year? Was he somebody in the community that was out there with a band or anything that you were aware of?
I did not.
Did not even know him?
Didn't know Richard Goodall, never had heard of Richard Goodall. And we did a story. We had heard that Richard Goodall was going to be on America's Got Talent, which of course is an NBC show. We're an NBC affiliate.
Right.
So we went out, we did a story on this janitor. Well, what he couldn't tell us was that he had gotten that golden buzzer, because by contractual things, he couldn't say anything.
Yeah.
So we did that story. Well, then we find out he got a golden buzzer.
Yeah.
And so we invited him down to the station, and we have pictures of him coming up the walk, and we've got confetti going everywhere, and we had sent a limo to get him. So that was my first time meeting him. Such a nice man.
Yeah.
So humble.
Has to be humble.
Yeah. And then it just kept going on from there. So we realized we had asked him to come to the station, and he didn't have reliable transportation that he thought he could get here. And so then we realized he needed a vehicle.
Yeah, this is from Terre Haute that he didn't have reliable
Yeah, I think West Terre Haute
transportation.
maybe, or Terre Haute,
Yeah.
but he couldn't get down here because, we're about 20 minutes south
Right.
of Terre Haute. And so we hooked him up with Walker Hayes.
Yes.
Because Walker Hayes is a country singer, and he has a song about how he needed a car because he had so many kids, but the car with enough seat belts got repossessed, so he has this whole car foundation. And so we got them together. We gave Richard a car, helped to get Richard a car, and then he just kept doing better. He got to the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and then the finale. And I flew out to Los Angeles for the finale, and then for the reveal show.
So you were there for the finale?
Yes, so I was there for the finale when he sang, and then the reveal show when he found out he won.
So that wasn't live, the reveal show?
The reveal show was not. So usually it is live, but this time there was some kind of I don't know, the production issues, so they had to actually tape the reveal show. So for about 3-4 days, I knew that he had won. I know it was so hard to not say anything, but I had to sign all this legal paperwork that basically said if I told, I was in deep doo-doo. So I did not tell. But yes, so then we finally got to reveal it. But I got to be on the red carpet, and I met Simon Cowell and Heidi Klum, and and Sofia Vergara and Howie Mandel, and of course I got to interview Richard and his now wife Angie multiple times. So that was just a great experience, and good for him.
So you were one of the, I'll say dozen, but probably more with the production crew that they had there in the entire world who knew.
Well, and the
that he'd already
audience
won.
knew. I was so sure. Yeah, there was an audience. I was
they would
so
know,
sure that somebody would leak it.
Yeah.
But never did. Now, they made sure you could not have any kind of camera or cell phone out during that, the reveal show, because, they didn't want it leaked. But no, it did not. I mean, people speculated that he won. There was like an AI video that came out showing that he won, but it was like a false video. He was wearing white, and he never wore white. And But And
he got to play with the band
Journey.
Did you know that going there?
Well, I didn't know that he was going to get to do that until on the show where he performed his final performance before Journey, like the final performance, where people got to vote on. They announced it there that he would get to play with Journey. But see, he knew that, but he couldn't tell us that.
I don't even know. I wonder if he could have told his, I think, fiance, who he just recently got married to, right?
Yes.
Do you know if she knew?
Well, she might have. We tell our husbands and wives and significant others that.
Not me. No, I wouldn't do that. No.
So sometimes we give those little secrets to them. So I don't know if she knew or didn't know.
No, I probably would have been at the grocery store and went up to somebody I didn't know. I just won America's Got Talent. Got to tell somebody. So you might as well be the one. That is a story in itself, and that's very recent. So I know a person who knows Richard Goodall. So I knew a person who knew Dana Winklepleck. So if you want Richard Goodall on here, I got a contact here. He's a little busy right now, though.
He is a little busy, yes.
I mean, I think he was in Princeton. He's performing shows now, right?
He was, yes. So he was in Princeton. I wonder if that wasn't set up. I don't know this. Set up before the AGT thing.
Was he with the band that performed in the local area?
And he has done that too. I think that the band has parted ways, but he certainly has been in a band called Menopause that performed various things.
Yeah. So did you get to interview him right after he won, or it? You did?
Yeah, I got to interview him right after he won. You can watch it online at mywabashvalley.com. Yes. And I got to watch him. I got to also interview him after the semifinals, to ask him how he thought it went, if he thought he was going to win. But Howie Mandel had told me after the final performance, but before the reveal show, he goes, "Your man has won." Because he felt that. We didn't know officially, but he just felt that Richard had won by that performance. And Howie was he's one of the people that discovered Richard Goodall, because Richard Goodall made a TikTok video. Howie Mandel saw that TikTok video, and he brought it to the attention of the AGT people, and lo and behold, that's what got the ball rolling to get Richard out there as a contestant.
And I'm sure all of you know, well, not sure all of you know, but he's a janitor at, is it West Vigo?
West Vigo, middle school.
At West Vigo Middle School, and and Walker Hayes, that's the date night, Applebee's night.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So he helped.
Bougie with like Applebee's or something like that.
Something like that. But that's amazing, and I can't even imagine the humbling experience for him because of all the support and, of course, just winning $1 million. But,
and he says he can't go anywhere now that someone doesn't take a selfie. He says his trips to Walmart have gotten much longer.
Yeah. Well,
but he's not complaining.
No, I bet you've been in that situation a few times too. You're at Walmart and somebody says, "Hey, Dana."
You know what? That's okay, though. I love it when people come up and say hello, because that means they're watching.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. All right. Enough about Richard Goodall.
Okay.
For now.
Okay.
Anyway, let's get personal a little bit.
Okay.
All right, if you don't mind.
No.
So you're married.
I'm married.
Tell me a little bit about your husband.
Okay. So my husband, he is a judge in Sullivan County.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And before that, he was a prosecutor.
Uh-oh.
So, but how we met was actually in the early 2000s, I was covering a murder trial. And then he was the chief deputy prosecutor. And I was supposed to interview his boss about this murder trial.
Okay.
Well, the boss had something come up, so he told Bob he was going to have to do the interview. So I interviewed Bob that day, and I was so smitten. And some time then passed, and one day he was on the television, and Tom McClanahan and I were both sitting at the anchor desk, and I go, oh, there is that handsome Bob Hundley. That's my husband.
Okay.
And Tom's like, would you go out with him? I'm like, if he asked me, I'd go out with him.
Okay.
And so little did I know that Tom knew someone who worked in the prosecutor's office, told Bob to ask me out, and then he did, and
there we are.
yeah,
Wow.
almost 19 years later.
19 years later. I do get a little nosy.
Okay.
And I always tell the people, answer if you want to, don't if you don't.
Okay.
What was there a romantic or an interesting story around the proposal from Bob?
What did we do? You know what he did? He treated me to a spa day. He called it Dana's Day. I know. Well, we had been doing a lot around.
Some of the ones I've gotten, that's the best.
Is that a good one?
Yeah.
Well, we had been working around his house, like doing a little bit of remodeling and things like that. And so I'd taken the day off. It was a Good Friday, and he said we were going to do some more of that. But instead, he surprised me, and he said, we're not doing that. And he got me a card and some flowers, and he said, this is what you need to pack for your day. And then so he had this whole spa day planned. I got everything. And then that evening he picked me up from the spa, and we went out to the Black Anchus.
Okay.
And he had arranged to have a dozen roses delivered, and he proposed to me there. I know, isn't that a good story?
That's pretty good.
And I love that man so much.
Yeah.
He's a good one.
All right. Is he still working with or is he a judge still?
Yeah,
or-
so he's still
okay.
a judge. So he worked in the prosecutor's office as a chief deputy, and then as the elected prosecutor, and then ran for judge. So he's been judge about 10 years. I think in the prosecutor's office he was there for about 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've got a daughter?
And we have a daughter.
Tell me about her.
So her name is Ashlyn, and she, is my stepdaughter. But I helped raise her. I call her my daughter, and I love her so much. She made us dinner last night, which is delicious. She's an English teacher.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, at a local high school.
Okay.
She's 21, and
Yeah.
she's doing fine.
I also saw, because I invade Facebook. I mean, I don't think that's especially when I do these, I grab pictures. It's public knowledge anyway, so I don't think I can get in trouble for that. But I did see, and this is very unique, birthdays.
Yes.
In your birthday, I don't know which is which.
Okay.
November 3rd.
Yeah, that's mine.
Oh, can I say the dates?
Yeah, November
Okay.
3rd.
November 3rd, November 4th,
Right.
and November 5th.
Yeah, so I'm November 3rd, my husband is November 4th, and my daughter is November 5th.
And just 3 people in the family.
Yeah, and wait, Bob's sister is November 2nd. So we call it pre-Christmas. We always have a
guess.
birthday get-together. And
Yeah. I mean, maybe you have 10 people in your family. I could see maybe that, but you might be the only 3 in America of one, trio
Yeah.
of a family that has
3, 4, 5.
November 3rd and 4th.
Yeah. Remember that. If you want to give me a present. No.
November 3rd, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's coming up.
That's right.
All right. All right. So I guess when you think about your career, and you just said this has been a great year, and after 30 years, it just gets better.
Yeah.
What's next for you? I mean, I'm not asking you to retire or anything,
No.
but
And I'm not ready to retire.
no. But what other aspirations do you have? Whether it's work, whether it's life, things that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, you know what? I think I do hope that opportunities continue to come available. I could have never predicted the Richard Goodall experience. I couldn't have predicted Dateline. I couldn't have predicted getting to fly in an F-18. But I hope those opportunities continue to come my way, and I will always say yes, because I'm a yes, let's give it a try, let's go for it kind of person. So I hope that more of those opportunities come. I'd like to continue to travel more. My husband and I, we got some vacations planned, so I hope to continue to do more of that. And I'm very much a family-oriented person. I said early in my younger days I wanted to travel the world, and I do enjoy that, but like when I was living overseas, I realized that my heart was still back here. And so the thought of traveling embassies and working overseas my whole career just didn't appeal to me anymore, because I just miss the people back home so much. And so, I love being with the people that I love.
What's the most beautiful place in the world you've been?
Oh my gosh, what is the most
I know.
beautiful place? That's hard.
For all the places you've been.
Yeah. I don't know. I always
Okay.
have a soft spot for the Grand Canyon, though. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it
There's
is.
just something so peaceful about that.
Yeah, the Grand Canyon. Quick story I know it's not about me, but real quick story.
Yeah,
about
quick
the
story.
Grand
We'd
Canyon.
love to hear it.
So my daughter was in the 6th grade,
Okay.
and she had a friend, and we went out to Las Vegas. We were going to the Grand Canyon, and they had these fires in the Grand Canyon.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's only certain ways you could get there. And we were on a lonesome road out there for miles and miles and hours, and her friend said, "You'd think if 3 million people visit this Grand Canyon a day, we'd see one of them." And we never did make it that day. We never did make it. It looked like coal mines in Pike County or what have you. And we thought, this can't be it.
Yeah.
But we went back.
Okay.
And it is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we flew over it. But yeah, that's the Grand Canyon story. We never found it. My uncle to this day.
It's like, how do you miss the Grand
That's
Canyon?
right. That's right. Are you sure you can find it? It's it's there, but
It's kind of big, Greg.
Yeah, it's kind of big. Well, not that day it wasn't. Not that day it wasn't.
That's a good story.
Yeah. What is it that we haven't talked about that you'd love the people to know, or that I didn't bring up? We didn't talk anything at all.
I think just the most thing is that I love what I do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that if you find something you love and you're able to do it your whole career, that's something really special. So I've always appreciated the fact that people have invited me into their homes for the last 30 years. I try to really respect that. But I just feel like I've been very lucky to get to do a job that I love. Like, I never get the Sunday blues because I love going to work.
So the Sunday blues, meaning I don't want to get up and go to work
Exactly.
the next day.
That doesn't hit me.
But in saying that, you've had different jobs here, and the
Yeah.
morning job was.
Yes.
I mean, what time did you have to get up those days?
Yeah, so for 13 years, I worked the morning show. So I'd have to be here. I usually would get about 2:30 in the morning. I had to be here
2:30 in the
3:30.
morning?
I know. I'd get up early.
Yeah.
But that afforded me the opportunity to help raise my daughter. When you have children, like back then, the shift, if you wanted to be on the main anchor set, you had to work 3 to midnight. Well, my husband works 8 to 4. My daughter, was in school, and then we shoot in activities after school. So that just does not make a good family life.
Right.
So I chose to stay on the morning show all of those years and didn't get much sleep because just, again, family was so important. I wanted to be there for all those big events, and I do think that was very healthy for my family and for us.
Yeah. So now you're the noon, and is it 6 anchor?
And 5.
And 5.
So 5, yes.
So a little bit more manageable around the day, right?
Yes. So they came to me. About 3 or 4 years ago, and maybe a little longer time kind of goes. But they said, "Hey, listen, how about if you will come and do the 5 and 6? We'll let you do the noon show, and you don't have to stay until midnight." And I said, "I'll take it."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was nice. So I get here at 9, and I leave at 6:30.
Yeah. You see all these bloopers from news anchors. Have you got any that stand out?
Oh, I got some. Do you remember the show TV Bloopers and Practical Jokes? Yeah, I was on that a couple times. I know.
Maybe I knew that.
Yeah, I was on that a couple times.
Okay.
My big national debut is a mistake.
Yeah, that's all right. That's
But
okay.
it happens.
Yeah. So that teleprompter out there.
Yes.
How in the world can you read anything off of that?
Well, the letters are great big, thank goodness.
Okay. All right. But you always have paper there, right?
Well, we now have iPads. So for years we had paper,
that's right.
but now we have iPads that we can
And
read
it's
off
the
of.
same thing. It's just that if something happens here,
Yes.
you've got backup.
Yeah.
Has that ever happened with the teleprompter going out?
Yeah, it happens once in a great while. Yeah.
So when you first started, was there a teleprompter, or was it cue cards, or
No,
just paper? Or?
It's always been the teleprompter.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've always
All
had to
right.
do that. Before me, though, they actually had, for the teleprompter, now it's all done through computer, but they actually had a conveyor belt. You'd put the scripts on, and it was almost like a projector somehow.
Okay, yeah,
I don't know how it
I can
all
picture
worked.
that, yeah.
But I remember getting here, when I first arrived here, it was in storage somewhere, and someone
Yeah.
explained to me how that worked. But every once in a while, people would get the pages out of order.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it would be a hot mess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's where your bloopers come in.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And back then too, when I first started, we had tapes. We were talking about those VHS tapes, and you had a tape guy, and he'd put the tape in for the story, and then when that story was done, he'd have to put it out, put the next tape in. Every once in a while, those tapes would get out of order too.
Yeah.
So you might be talking about a car wreck, and
there's a
turkeys
whole-
show up. You never knew what was going to happen. But
I've seen some of that too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people it takes to put on a
yes,
show
it
like
does.
this, right?
Yeah, you might see the 4 of us out here, but that means
Yeah.
there's 20 more people behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, doggone it, I know there will be something when I go home that I was going to ask, or I wanted to ask, but I appreciate your time so
Oh,
much, Dana.
it's so good to see
Yeah.
you. You're the nicest person.
I am the nicest person.
You
We
are.
voted on that in my family, and I was third, but
Oh,
that's all right.
out of how many?
7.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's not
bad. I'll
too
take
bad.
it. Yeah. And I've always wanted to do this. So all right.
Okay.
That's sports. Now back to the news. Here's Dana. How's
Thank
that?
you so much, Greg. I appreciate that.
Dana
All right.
Winklepleck, everybody.
Hey, thank you.
Hometown girl.
Hometown girl.
Thanks for watching this edition of Getting to Know Your Indiana Neighbor.